Hello, and welcome back. We're working on lesson 1.4, and we've waited to look at lesson 1.4 because it's really more related to chapters 8, 9, and 10 than anything else. 1.4 is all about experimental design and ethics. And so we're talking about running an experiment or some kind of an observational study. So an experiment is set up because we want to test something. We're wondering if something that we've always thought is true is maybe changed. And that's what we're going to be looking at with hypothesis testing in chapter 10. So we have to think about what is an explanatory and a response variable. So if you go back to algebra class, we learned about X and Y and how usually X is usually our independent variables. So the explanatory variable is what we would call our independent variable. We think it explains something about Y. Now, we're not saying it necessarily causes Y, it explains something about Y. Y is our response variable, the affected variable, and we usually call this our dependent variable. There are two types of studies that we're going to look at. One is an observational study. It measures the value of the response variable without attempting to influence the value of either the response variable or explanatory variable. That is, in an observational study, the researcher observes the behavior of individuals without trying to influence the outcome of the study. So if you were to do a study on, does smoking affect the birth weight of a baby? This would be an observational study because an observational study is usually about variables that you can't control. Ethically, you would never be able to control somebody, whether they were smoking or not. It's a choice. That should be a choice. So another type of study is called a designed experiment. It's a controlled study to determine the effect of varying one or more explanatory variables or factors that has on a response variable. Any combination of the values of the factors is called a treatment. So a design experiment is where you're actually controlling, you're actually randomly assigning people to a group. So an experimental unit is a single object or individual to be measured in the experiment. Additional variables that can cloud a study are called lurking variables. And so when we're talking about a designed experiments, this kind of all goes together. So you randomly assign objects or individuals to a group, a treatment. So when we're looking at treatments or groups, we could have a placebo. A placebo is a neutral treatment that has no effect on the response variables. Some placebos would be maybe called if you were talking about medicine, doctors might use a sugar pill where they give some people in a certain group sugar pills so that they don't know if they're getting the medicine or not. And then some people actually get the medicine, and that's the way they can control who is getting the medicine and who's not, and actually do a test on that. Because if people think that they're getting the pill or not getting the pill, they may observe different results because in their mind, they might think that they're doing better health-wise when really they were just getting a sugar pill. They weren't getting the actual medicine. Okay, a control group is a group that receives a baseline treatment that can be used to compare to other treatments. Control groups can be established in a wide variety of ways, such as no treatment, neutral treatment, placebo, or standard treatment. Control group means the group receives a baseline treatment, not that the group is being controlled by the researcher, okay? They're just kind of like the baseline group. Now, I mentioned up here that the sugar pill, sometimes you would maybe do this so that the patient won't know if they're receiving the true treatment medicine or not. That's called blinding. Blinding is a randomized experiment, preserves the power of suggestion. When a person involved in a research study is blinded, he does not know who is receiving the active treatment or treatments and who is receiving the placebo treatment. That's definitely good to do with, like, let's say that we're doing a migraine study. And if I didn't get anything at all, and then I had to observe whether I'm having migraines and how bad they are, versus if I were receiving medicine and I knew I was getting medicine, and they sometimes will ask you questions like, how are you feeling? Are you getting more migraines? Are you coping better? Well, if you knew you were getting medicine, you may subconsciously say, yes, I'm feeling better, even though you don't know if the medicine's really working, because it's called the power of suggestion. You're actually kind of working yourself in your mind saying, I know I'm doing better. Another blinding is called a double-blind experiment, is one in which both the subjects and the researchers involved with the subjects are blinded. Now, this is sometimes used when the researcher has to make observations that they're going to measure. So such as, let's say I was measuring a patient that has multiple sclerosis. So some symptoms of MS, multiple sclerosis, is that when you watch the patient walk, they tend to kind of be a little wobbly or have to kind of put their hands on a wall to stay steady. And if the doctor knew that they were or were not receiving the treatment, and then they observe them walking, they may subconsciously go, oh, I see that they're walking better. It's because I know that they're getting the medicine. And so it's better if in these situations, the doctor or the researcher doesn't know who is getting the medicine and who is not. So that's why they might use a double-blind experiment. Okay. The next thing is, we cannot say that an explanatory variable causes a response variable unless we have used a designed experiment. So if we are only using an observational study, we can't say anything causes anything, because you did not actually control and randomly assign objects to a group. Okay. So one thing to also note is correlation does not mean causation. Just because we see a relationship between two variables doesn't mean that one causes the other. And so let's look at some examples. Example 1 says, a researcher wants to study the effects of birth order on personality. Explain why this study could not be conducted as a randomized experiment. What is the main problem in a study that cannot be designed as a randomized experiment? So we could never put somebody in a randomized experiment based on their birth order, because you cannot change somebody's birth order. And if you cannot do a randomized designed experiment, then you cannot explain causality. You can't say anything is causing. You cannot say the explanatory variable causes the response variable. Okay. Example 2. You are concerned about the effects of texting on driving performance. Design a study to test the response time of drivers while texting and while driving only. How many seconds does it take for a driver to respond when a leading car hits the brakes? So describe the explanatory and response variables. So the explanatory would be, are they texting, yes or no? Because they're going to have them text or not text. And then the response would be the response time when they hit the brakes. It says, what are the treatments? And that would be allowing them to text or no texting. That would be the treatments. What should you consider when selecting participants? You probably want to make sure that they are different age groups. Different genders would probably be good. You would want to have the same weather conditions for everybody. Weather and road conditions, those would be important. These are just a few. You may think of others that would be important. Your research partner wants to divide participants randomly into two groups, one to drive without distraction and one to text and drive simultaneously. Is this a good idea? Why or why not? Bad idea, because what if the person that's texting and driving is distracted and will cause an accident? Because the texter could be distracted and cause an accident. Identify any lurking variables that could interfere with this study. Well, what if somebody has an underlying health condition? So a health condition could cause somebody to have a heart attack or a seizure, right? If they don't protect, if they don't think about the weather could be some kind of a variable that they may not be thinking about. Weather, because the weather can cause like icy roads or snowy roads or such. And then how can blinding be used in this study? Well, you cannot. And that's because clearly a driver will know if they are texting or not. So not really optional to do a blinding in the study. Okay. The other part of this lesson is all about ethics. So ethics is the widespread misuse and misrepresentation of statistical information often gives the field a bad name. Some say that numbers don't lie, but the people who use numbers to support their claims often do. And that's unfortunate. That's true. You can definitely use numbers and statistics to sometimes prove your point in either direction, depending on how you use the numbers. So let's look at an example here. It says, describe the unethical behavior in each example and describe how it could impact the reliability of the resulting data. Explain how the problem should be corrected. So it says, a researcher is collecting data in a community. She selects a block where she is comfortable walking and because she knows many of the people living on the street. Well, that might not be good because those people that know her may give a response different than their honest response on something because they know her. So let's look down here under the solution. By selecting a convenient sample, the researcher is intentionally selecting a sample that could be biased. Claiming that this sample represents the community is misleading. The researcher needs to select areas in the community at random. Okay. What about up here in B? The researcher, no one seems to be at home at 4 houses on her route. She does not record the addresses and does not return at a later time to try to find residents at home. So under the solution, it says intentionally omitting relevant data will create bias in the sample. Suppose the researcher is gathering information about jobs and childcare. By ignoring people who are not home, she may be missing data from working families that are relevant to her study. She needs to make every effort to interview all members of the target sample. And the third situation is she skips 4 houses on her route because she is running late for an appointment. When she gets home, she fills in the forms by selecting random answers from other residents in the neighborhood. Oh, she's falsifying information. That's not good. It says it is never acceptable to fake data, even though the responses she uses are real responses provided by other participants. The duplication is fraudulent and can create bias in the data. She needs to work diligently to interview everyone on her route. That is true. Okay, example 4. It says describe the unethical behavior if any in each example and describe how it could impact the reliability of the resulting data. Explain how the problem should be corrected. It says the study is commissioned to determine the favorite brand of fruit juice among teens in California. The survey is commissioned by the seller of a popular brand of apple juice. Well, they have an ulterior motive, right? Because they own a brand, they sell a particular brand. So of course they're going to want that brand to be popular. So that's definitely not a good thing. Should choose the survey to be done by people outside of the area and business. Okay. There are only 2 types of juice included in the study, apple and cranberry. Okay. Well, they may be missing, maybe the teens like some other type of juice. And they actually like other juices more. And you might come up with other answers to these. These are just some of my thoughts. Researchers allow participants to see the brand of juice as samples are poured for a taste test. Well, there's definitely going to be bias if they know what they are tasting. And I have a good example for this. My sister-in-law and I both said that Heinz ketchup is the best ketchup, and we would totally know if we were trying a ketchup that was something other than Heinz ketchup. So my husband and my brother-in-law decided to do a taste test. So they got ketchup from Heinz, and then I think it was like Meyer brand ketchup, and we didn't know what we were tasting. And she and I both tasted it, and we both chose the Meyer brand ketchup. And so that goes to show that if I would have known which one I was tasting, I probably would have chose the Heinz, but that's just because I had in my mind that they had a better flavored ketchup. So D says 25% of participants prefer brand X, 33% prefer brand Y, and 42% have no preference between the 2 brands. Brand X references the study in a commercial saying most teens like brand X as much as or more than brand Y. That is not true. 25 is bigger than 33. So, and maybe they're also including the 42 because these people had no preference. So they're like, oh, the 42 is really kind of included in not preferring brand Y. So they misconstrued the data. They should only be comparing the 25 to the 33. And those are the main topics of lesson 1.4, and you should be ready to head to chapter 9.